we can take is the environment of the heart and the mind, the ideological, the worldviews. So recognising that, our discussion began with what's the utility of the report for informing the heart and the mind, particularly of activists. We've got 3 points. John will talk about our first.
We first of all acknowledge that so many of the activists are in the climate field, the young activists. And the young people are the ones that will be the victims, as someone said, of the long-term consequences. They are the victims, but they don't have the vote and they don't often have the voice. So we can get the young people and put their voices there and emphasise the cost that we are putting onto those future generations. So making the links between the climate NGOs and climate activists and the importance of the militarisation and the cost effect of that. So making those links, that's one point.
Okay, another point was around language and the utility of the report for contributing to the discourse, the understandings, the words that we use. So the utility of the report for slogans, for promoting slogans like earth care, not warfare, for considering the enemy as not, oh, well, we moved on from climate inaction to those that are responsible for causing the climate inaction, which is the corporations. So, yeah, the utility of the report for informing activists and others about, importantly, the language that we use, contribution to discourse. Yeah, and move the money, which is a great way of moving ideas through language. Thanks.
Okay, so this last point, it's on the back of a recent success where Questacon was persuaded not to continue with the sponsorship from Santos and Shell. A few years back, some people will remember when the Smith family was persuaded to break their arrangement with BAE Systems. So IPAN, with the knowledge that they have and their certain status, could support further of these kind of actions in the world by speaking up about it, and also to support activists who are out there at these places, at these weapons corporations, at these companies, in particular in education. So IPAN could support, could speak up about this, add their voice and support activists who are trying to take action about this entanglements between corporations and particular in the education systems and universities.
Thanks, Grace. The next group is Military and Defence Group.
So we came up with, well, 6 recommendations, but you've seen, some of them are already in the report, like removal of foreign bases and signing the nuclear ban treaty. But we also suggested a few other things, such as investigating the potential for a self-reliant security policy that would, distance Australia more from the American alliance. Establish an Institute of Diplomacy and Peace, perhaps associated with DFAT, and to be publicly funded. We have in Australia, numbers of organizations that examine war, but we don't have one that looks at peace. And to establish policy that would lead to diplomatic solutions rather than military ones. And also continuing on our theme to reinvigorate DFAT. And when we say reinvigorate, we actually mean reverse that funding trend, giving them more money and enabling them to carry out a more active diplomatic agenda, both in the region and internationally, and also increasing the aid budget that Australia provides. And I guess lastly is, trying to figure out, what the heck is this AUKUS thing? For now, it still remains largely a slogan. We don't actually know the details behind it. And we're owed that by the government to be explained to us just what it is they're signing us up for.
Thanks, Albert. Foreign policy.
Hang on. I'm reporting on the.
Yes, we have Michelle.
I'm reporting on the Zoom part of military and defence. We weren't able to.
Colin,
With a foreign policy group, we had a fairly wide-ranging discussion. We started off with some big picture asks that it's about taking the report into different groups and putting forward the ideas in the report. So the groups we listed were MPs, the legal community, academics, media, DFAT, think tanks, including Lowy, Australia Institute, ASPI, AAA, the UNAA, civil society groups, also importantly Indigenous groups in a strategic way, domestic and international ones. So this is sort of taking our foreign policy ideas into these arenas. We started off with some big asks like signing the Treaty for the Prevention of Nuclear Weapons, and also ensuring the government confirms or denies the presence of nuclear weapons on planes, ships, or whatever may come here. So they were big asks, and then we decided we needed to get a little more specific on what we would ask people in these groups to do. So using MPs for an example, we wanted to keep it local and collaborate, and so go into these say the local MP and have a small ask that they could take into a bigger arena, because everyone wants to meet the minister, but how can we get there thinking that that's not going to happen straight away? So some of the things we thought was communicating with our local MP to try and arrange meetings with a minister or a minister's staffer or such and such to get the messages in that way. Also talking to local MPs in a branch meeting. So this is what IPAN local groups and members can do, talk to local MPs, branches, communicate with those MPs that already know the subject area, like the Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade subcommittees, and also people involved in regional forums. Another important idea was this strategic Indigenous engagement, to speak with our Indigenous people here about the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People and the Constitution in terms of the ideas of IPAN to engage with Indigenous people, because those really resonate. I think the main thing we were talking about was just keeping it targeted and small, because it is quite overwhelming. And so finding particular people to talk to about particular things and just step by step broadening the conversation in the community. Did I capture everything? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next one is political and democratic rights. I think Tim's got.
All right. We're a bit cheeky on a couple of levels. On one level, in that we were kind of adding a whole lot of of dot points on political and democratic rights that weren't necessarily in the report. And on another level, we were kind of trying to get a million things into 3 dot points. So the 3 dot points kind of all come under this point that we need to reverse the exclusion. The system is deliberately locking people out in order to get the outcomes that it wants. Top line we were discussing is that the peace movement needs to engage with the treaty process and decolonising at every level and work out how to step back and invite First Nations people in to talk about how we work towards treaty, because this is fundamental to a world which is a world of peace. Second set of points were around upending and reversing the existing suppression of involvement in various ways. So there's a couple of points that already were in the report in terms of whistleblower protection and anti-corruption laws. We're also talking about pushing back against the over-policing and criminalising protests and activism, working to repeal that whole suite, not just the foreign influence laws that we've been talking about already today, but that whole suite of post-9/11 security and anti-terrorism laws, a range of work around greater transparency and secrecy. And then the third suite, which is really around how activism, what we can do around this whole piece of work, is a suite of points around democratic innovations, ways to involve and reintroduce citizens into decision-making processes, participatory processes like the writing of this report, really working on deliberative fora in all sorts of ways, public citizen events, things like that you may or may not call nonviolent direct action. They might be fun things. It might be school engagement. It might be public, dance-ins and things like that at weapons fairs. One important point under that was kind of using this participatory process to reverse and replace the kind of the expertise mentality, which excludes so many people so much of the time, and particularly breaking open the gatekeeping of ASPI that is going on. Making Parliament matter more is another important part of this, which includes things like war powers reform, but we're also talking about the important independence and Greens and Voices campaigns that are trying to make Parliament actually matter more in this space. And a final idea around alternative advisory roundtables that are also kind of coming into this, where we bring NGO voices and academic voices and others into this conversation. So yeah, a bit cheeky as I say, but that's what we came up with.
Thanks, Tom. Students, I think Sam had to go, but someone else, yeah? Con can talk about that.
Now I know I don't look like a student, but I am a student of life. It's ongoing. That's the way. And we did have a number of younger, actual real students present, but they've had to go. So let's have a look. So a few points. So first of all, there is one school has a piece writing prize that they give out to students for students who've written about peace. So that's an idea that could be expanded, made, it can be taken a lot further. In some years ago, there used to be in Victoria a peace education. So the FTUV, which was at the time the Teachers Union, used to have a Teachers for Peace sort of branch. And so I was thinking we could do with IPAN a similar thing. Could we begin a Teachers for IPAN, so I'm personally interested in this if there are any other teachers here. Anyway, I'll keep moving quickly. Student unions, sending the report out to all the, magazines that student unions run and asking them to, get something into their magazines, perhaps. Oh, and connecting with School Strike for Climate. So I think someone mentioned, the environmental group mentioned earlier that a lot of the energy of young people is going into combating climate change. And one of the things that we can connect with them is the fact that 6% of global emissions come from countries keeping a military. And these figures are usually not shown in reports on where the emissions are coming from. And this doesn't even take into account the actual war. You know, when there's a war, what does that produce? And, you know, the mind boggles. But if we can get young leaders to take on, you know, to expand the vision from their action, you know, for climate to include war, then that's a way of getting young people to take leadership, which is, I think, what we want to try to encourage. And in that regard, we also thought about, would it be possible to have, similar to this IPAN conference, invite every university to a conference that is especially for university leaders, union leaders, or something like that from unis. So it's an idea. Youth targeted social media. So getting, you know, we need some TikTokers to get the word out there. And an idea here about YouTubers like Friendly Geordies. I don't know, you might know, I personally didn't know Friendly Geordies, but I'll look it up. So yeah, I think that's a range of ideas there. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Con. Now, the last of the groups here was the media group. Yeah, Kate.
Oh, you did that. Okay, well, we had lots of ideas. We tried to distill them down to 3. We focused on the problems of connecting with the media. And one of it was getting to know journalists. Like, journalists are too rushed and uninformed. They're constrained by their organisation's ethos or whatever. So one of the solutions is to form more personal relationships with them, so to amplify through socials and keep them informed. So yeah, so not just one person either, but if lots of people show interest, then they'll think it's a more important topic. Another one with this, the problem is we're normally preaching to the converted. So how do we get outside our bubble? And well, we know we need to reach outside of the traditional media with socials and everything like the other guys were talking about. With Friendly Geordies was another one that came up again. And music, comedy, and someone talked about how you can have like just a quick short, like a cartoon or TikTok or whatever, but then that leads you into finding more information. So you need to sort of make it a bit like a journey, like mysterious, and so they can find out more. So this is the sort of way to get into, well, people, not just young people, but people younger than us, so most of us. Yeah. And the other problem is the bipartisan support, like both branches of politics supporting the wars and supporting the US wars and so on. So we need to seek out independents and Greens and find their allies and keep in contact with them, get to know them and keep them informed. I mean, like the Greens have a policy, but you never hear about it. Their anti-war policy. Well, I don't. Like at times gone by, there's been a lot of women's movements with, Save Our Sons in the Vietnam War and so on. So Yeah. And basically, how do we make peace cool?
Thanks, Kate. Now, we do have an apology because in working these workshops out, we totally neglected the 24 people who are on Zoom. So they showed great initiative. They actually ran their own workshop with the help of our Zoom tech team here. And I think they're going to now report back from their workshop.
Yes, well, this is actually a Zoom meeting in connection with the military and defence workshop. We couldn't connect with them either visually or audibly, so we held our own meeting. There were about 7 or 8 participants. These are the 3 points we came out with. 1, hold Labor to their promise to sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And in the meantime, Australia to support no first use policies straight away. 2, no nuclear weapons on Australian soil or waters, including in transit. 3, a freeze on AUKUS, starting with a pause on the funding for AUKUS, and then to work on withdrawal from the US alliance. So that's our 3 points.
Into it. Just one last point I do want to emphasise as far as the report goes is that there's some fantastic work in that report from each of those panel leaders, some of which, of course, are here today and have talked to us. There are also the original submissions. So all of those submissions are available on the inquiry website. And I urge you to have a look at them because by the nature of it, not all of their ideas and input couldn't be included in those summaries that are in the report, but there's some fantastic material there that we can use. The same way as we're using the report, we can go to various submissions they're all public. The people were happy for them to be put, the ones who were happy for them to be put publicly are up on the website, and there's, you know, as I say, 250, I think, roughly, 283. So, you know, I urge you to have a look at all that. And